Alrighty guys, welcome. And today we're going to be talking about polynomial terminology. Polynomial terminology is basically the vocabulary of polynomials. So this is basically just going to be a vocabulary video where I go over the different vocab. Okay, so starting off, a polynomial, the formal definition is an expression made up of terms that consist of variables, constants, exponents that are whole numbers, okay? So those three things, variables, constants, and exponents, are what make up a polynomial, and those exponents have to be whole numbers. So I'm going to write down an example of a polynomial, and maybe you've seen something similar to this in your math career, but this is an example of a polynomial. Now, one of the first things it talks about is terms. It's an expression made up of terms. So what are terms? So the terms, it's going to underline this, but it is each of these individual parts. Normally a term is something broken up by an addition or a minus sign. So notice how there's plus and minuses between each of these. So the terms include 5x squared, negative 2x, and 7, okay? Those are what we call terms, each of the individual parts that are getting added and or subtracted from the expression in its entirety, okay? Then we have this other thing called coefficients. Okay, coefficients are the numbers in the terms. So in this case, it would be 5, negative 2, and 7. Okay, those are the coefficients, the numbers within the terms. Okay, then we also have this thing called a variable. Okay, and a variable is whatever letter is used to represent a value, okay? So it could be X, it could be Y, it could be Z, it could be Q, could be alpha, could be delta. It's normally a letter, but sometimes it could be Greek letters, okay? So we got terms, coefficients, variables. Now we also have this thing called a constant, okay? The constant is the part of the term that has no variable on it. Okay, so in this case, it would be positive 7, because that is the term that has no variable. Okay? Now, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of these include exponents. If you remember, exponents are the little numbers that are normally up above the variables. So this is x squared, x cubed, x to the 4th power, x to the 5th power. If we remember, that just means timesing itself twice. So x squared is just x times x. Okay, then we also have this thing called a degree. Now, a degree focuses on the highest exponent value within the entire expression. So the degree of a term, I'm just looking for the exponent value of that term. The degree of a polynomial, I'm looking for the highest degree in that polynomial. In this case, it would be 2, because that's the highest exponent we have. We have a degree of 2. Okay, then we have one more thing that is important. We have this thing called a leading term. The leading term is the term that has the highest degree in it. Because normally when we write it out, we like to have the highest degree first and the second highest degree, so on and so forth. So the leading term is the term that has the highest degree in it, which in this case would be 5x squared. Okay, so those are all the big parts of a polynomial. and what they mean, how they're utilized. Now, we also have to deal with classifying them. Classifying them means just giving them a name based on their characteristics. So we'll start with based on the number of terms that they have. So, for example, a monomial is a polynomial that only has one term in it. Okay, a monomial, one term. Mono, one, nomial, number. Okay. Then you can probably guess the next one. The next one is binomial. Bi, two, nomial, number. So there we go. There is a simple binomial. One of the last ones we deal with is called a trinomial. Which, as you probably guess, has 3 parts. Okay, so meaning terms. So we first classify them by the number of terms. If we're dealing with any more than that, then normally we just go straight to polynomial. Technically, all of these are polynomials, but we refer to them as polynomials when they have 4 or more terms on them. So in this case, like this. Okay? So these are different examples. So this is one of the parts that we use to classify it. We do it by the number of terms. And the second part is we do it by the degree. Okay? So when we just have a singular number, if you remember earlier, I called that a constant. If I just have a number, so say I have the number 7, that is because I have a degree of 0, meaning the x variable in this has a degree of 0. It's just not there, okay? The next one that we work with is called a linear polynomial. Linear, an example, would be, like I wrote before, linear. And we call it that because it has a degree of 1. So there's an invisible 1 in the exponent right here, just like there's an invisible x to the 0 right there. Then we have quadratics. Which, again, one of the more common of the polynomials. That one is called that because it has a degree of 2. It's also based on what the graph looks like when you graph these. All right. And then normally this is the highest we go. We call it a cubic polynomial. So a cubic polynomial goes up to a degree of 3. So we will do this. Okay? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to have 3 terms for it to be cubic. It's cubic, all these are just talking about the exponent value, the highest exponent value that we get to. So this is a cubic because it has a degree of 3. So technically you could go up to quintic, which is 4, quartic, which is 5, but at that point, I would just do the nth degree, meaning you just say 4th degree, 5th degree, 8th degree. So you just say whatever number the degree is and just put degree after it. That is the simplest way to do it. So if you remember, we are classifying polynomials through their number of terms and the degree that they have. So, for example, let me write down this guy right here. I have negative 2x cubed plus 7x plus 9 minus 5x squared. So we are going to start classifying it with the two things that we know. So first off, let's look at the degree, because that's normally the first thing we list. So looking at the degree, I can see I have an exponent here and an exponent here. Technically, there is an invisible one right here and here, but for now, we'll just look at the visible ones. The visible ones are 3 and 2. 3 is greater than 2, so that is where we get our cubic. Then I'm going to be looking at the number of terms. So essentially, how many things are separated by minuses and pluses. So I have this guy right here, this guy right here, that guy right there, that guy right there. So I managed to make 4 boxes, so there's 4 terms. And if you remember, if we get up to 4 terms, we just write polynomial. So how we would classify this guy using all of our polynomial terminology, it's a cubic polynomial. All right? So there you are. There are some examples of polynomial terminology, and thank you for watching.